Welcome back to Second Breakfast and our ongoing coverage of A Game of Thrones, bringing you the best thoughts, theories, and literary analysis this side of Westeros.
Ooh, so exciting. Today we're talking about Jon number 5, yes?
Yes, 5.
Only 5. Wild.
Oh, we'll get there.
I'm excited to talk about this. This is a real little chapter, just like 5 or 6 pages, just a quick little thing. But I've got some fun Tolkien stuff. You've got some fun stuff. It's going to be a good discussion.
Yeah,
I'm looking forward
it's
to it.
more meditative, I think. But I'm excited to talk about it. So what happened in these mere 6 pages, Maggie?
Ooh, let me tell you. First, I want to say thank you all for the kind birthday messages you sent Cam last week. If you didn't do that, you still have time. It still applies. It's still his birthday month. Send him a happy birthday in the comments below. Thank you very much.
Those were as mortifying as they were gratifying.
It's so funny because I hate being given attention on my birthday,
Sure.
but I love to give it to other people on their birthday. I will happily embarrass them to no end.
Most bullying comes from a place of insecurity.
That's true. I love it. Okay, so this is A Game of Thrones, Jon number 5. As always, quick spoiler reminder for everything in the show and books beyond this chapter in our discussion, etc. So, we're at the wall, of course, because it's Jon. And Sir Alliser Thorne, I had to say that because it's been like
Speaking
forever.
of bullying.
Yeah, yeah, for real. He is like, he hates everybody so much. But his announcement is that there are some new boys arriving at the wall shortly. And so they've got to kind of push some guys currently there up the ladder, up the chain. And they have to go be with the Lord Commander, meaning they have to actually take their vows. Because if you don't know, Jon and his buddies have not yet taken their vows yet. They're still like newbies. It's kind of like when you're a nun and you go to a nunnery, you like spend some time as a novice or whatever it's called before you become a nun.
I saw Immaculate.
Oh, we saw that one. We did do that on the Patreon. It was fun. Okay, so the people who are going to be moved up the chain, who are going to take their vows, are Pip, Gren, some other guys, and Jon, but not Sam, very importantly. So Jon is noticing that Sam is seeming pretty down after this announcement, but he's trying not to show it. And also Sam is not at dinner that night, and so Jon can tell that he's like worried how it's going to go now that he doesn't have his friends to like help him and back him up and keep him from being bullied to death
Or killed.
yeah,
right.
like bullied to death, genuinely. So he's feeling kind of freaked out about it, and Jon isn't sure what to do. And so he pops out to go for a ride. He brings Ghost with him so that Ghost can hunt, obviously. He goes out for a pensive walk, his main character moment. And he does some thinking, and he's like, should I leave? I haven't even taken my vows yet. Should I go home? Well, where can I go? I have no place at Winterfell. He eventually realizes that his place really is here, and so he turns around to go back to the wall. And he goes to speak to Maester Aemon, and it's very urgent. It's the middle of the night, but he's like, I gotta talk to this guy right now. It's important. And he asks Maester Aemon to convince the Lord Commander to let Sam go with Jon and the other guys who are moving up, because it's like a life or death situation. He's like, Maester Aemon, if Sam doesn't get to, come up with us, he's never going to become a good fighter. He's going to get hurt, injured, and might even be killed. You could put him to use instead of him just like uselessly dying here. And when asked like, what could he do, he says that Sam could basically be Maester Aemon's assistant. He could help him write his letters because Sam knows how to read and write. Sam's really smart and knows everything. He's also really good with animals, so he could work with the ravens and stuff. So he was like, he could be your like right-hand buddy, and that's where he could be put to use. And so Maester Aemon says that he'll think on it. And that's where we leave with our chapter.
It's very sweet. These goddamn Jon chapters keep making me cry. I hate
really?
it, but
Which part made you cry?
We'll get there.
Oh, a little tease.
That's my second point because it's more emotion. There's not that much substance there. It's just me, wiping my tears away. But I wanted to start with something like I was calling before, a little bit more meditative.
Okay.
I was thinking about time. Obviously, we've been doing this 42 weeks in a row now, and we're about 400 pages deep in the book. I was shocked. I had to go back through my notes and make sure my numbering was correct, that we were only 5 chapters deep.
On Jon, yeah.
On Jon, because we've gone through 40 chapters, and I feel like Jon has moved a lot more than that.
Sure.
Like Ned, I'm flipping back on my notes if you can hear that ASMR. We are 10 chapters on Ned, 7 on Catelyn. The
there
numbers
are most ones, yeah.
They're getting pretty high. We're hitting double digits, and I was shocked that this was only the 5th Jon. And that's where my analysis was starting.
Okay, because I know we have a couple from Tyrion where we get a lot of Jon, but even still, it's maybe 1 of maybe 2. So it's still not very many of Jon.
It's more. It's around 5.
Okay,
But I think Jon, Tyrion, Dany, these occasional POV characters, they're all hovering at around 5 or 6 right now. I think Jon feels unique. I think the writing style, the kind of pacing of his story feels different, where it feels more like a scene or an act in a play where the pacing is accelerated. If you look at Macbeth and you see how many offices Macbeth holds, if you see how much growth, how much ascension there can be in one of the Shakespearean histories, the characterization is incredibly condensed.
Right, I was going to say, Macbeth is one of the shorter plays, isn't it?
Exactly. That only makes the point stronger. Thank you very much. That was
welcome.
A little bounce pass. But
I didn't get that English degree for nothing. I remember some things.
But there is a play-like quality to the way Jon's story is being divvied up, where we jump across time and character development and just dive in for these very particular important moments.
That's true, because people like Ned and Catelyn, we get them like every day. And
Exactly.
Jon, like weeks pass before we get to talk to him again.
Yeah, totally. And Dany's the interesting comparison here, because we've had about 5 chapters for her, and she's had a ton of development and change, and the locations she's seen. I mean, she's always kind of the globe-trotting POV character, and we've talked about those occasional pointed, dense chapters as these Targaryen checkpoints. And I was trying to challenge this observation and figure out why Jon's felt different than Dany's, why we don't consider those Jon checkpoints. And I think Dany's POV, the way her character is written, is more zoomed out. It is more about the state of the Union and all of Westeros. And I think Jon's is different. I think it's more archetypical. It's diving into a part of fantasy that Dany's storyline isn't playing with yet, at least. So I went back through, because this is chapter 5, and I was reviewing my notes of the first 4 Jon chapters, and there's an interesting pattern that started to emerge where Jon is occupying a role in each chapter that is new and different, with a companion in each chapter that is new and different. And that central companion kind of tells you something about him.
Ooh, okay.
They become kind of a grindstone. So the first chapter is about Jon, his role as a bastard.
Yeah.
And his companion, his colleague there, is Tyrion.
Right.
And we learn about Jon through this vector of Tyrion.
Yes, yes.
And then the second chapter, it's about Jon being, just generally competent. And that sort of focuses in on him as this budding swordsman. And the companion there is Arya.
Yeah,
and him giving her needle.
Yes.
So you see how we learn about him through these central companions.
Sure, yeah.
Which, that happens elsewhere, but I think it's particularly pointed in Jon's story. The third chapter is about, we're kind of scaling back Jon, and it's about him being an amateur. His companions,
is that his first time at the wall?
Yes.
Okay.
His companions are Benjen, Donal Noy, and Tyrion. And they are all giving him a talking to and kind of taking him down a little bit.
Yeah.
It's about him having those fights in the armory. Him finding out that he's kind of bullying the other guys at the wall.
Kind of being classist, yeah.
And that he's not fully aware of how he's being perceived. So it's about him being this amateur. And then in the fourth Jon chapter, Samwell Tarly is his main companion.
Of course,
and this is where we really see Jon grow into this fourth occupation so far as a brother. And obviously that works in different interpretations. He's being a brother to Sam in the same way he's a brother to Robb or Bran, but he's also finally becoming a brother of the Night's Watch. We're seeing him kind of slot into the wall and find his place there. So I was trying to see what it felt like, what role, what companion he had in this fifth chapter, because I think that structure does pan out here, and it felt more zoomed out. It felt like he was really advancing. I know he's, 13 in the books?
He's 15 now.
Okay, yeah.
He's 15.
All these characters are so crazy young in the book, but
I think he's like freshly 15.
He does not read 15 in this chapter.
No.
It's the fifth chapter, and I know we're not skipping too much time in between Jon's chapters.
Just a couple weeks, yeah.
But it feels like he has massively evolved.
So he's like a young man.
I think he feels like a full-grown man here. Because the role and occupation I'm saying he's in this chapter is that of a general.
Oh, wow.
And his companions are his men. He's his consultants, his advisors. The way he talks to Pip and Gren and Sam and Chet, and even kind of consulting with Maester Aemon.
Yeah.
He's kind of finger to the wind, surveying the battlefield. He's got this general-like quality. And I know later we'll get to that idea that Sam pinpoints for him of him being groomed for command. But I felt like we were kind of getting a preview of where he would end up there. And I love that these 5 chapters so far, obviously I want to know what you think of this, but it feels like all of these Jon chapters are distinct eras of this character. It is much more occasional that we get these snapshots of him as he rises through the ranks, sort of at these different, almost military ranks. You know, he starts as this little corporal or whatever the first one is, and now I'm saying he already feels like a general.
I see.
5 chapters in, as you compared earlier to those almost real-time chapters that we get from Ned or Catelyn or Tyrion. This is so much more sparing than that. Those feel like, you know, watching an episode of 24. And these feel like these, like, I don't know, arched high fantasy vignettes. These, isolated short stories about the young boy with potential who rises through the ranks. I'm really enjoying the contrast there.
I do like this a lot. Who are you arguing is the companion in this chapter? Is it just himself?
His men, I think,
his
because
men. Okay.
I tried to say that before, because he is elevated to this general position.
Okay.
I think it's the way he interacts with all of them with this kind of same level of respect. Pipgren, Sam, Chet, and Maester Aemon.
Yeah, just kind of as a whole.
Yeah.
Like all these people are kind of one unit. Yeah.
Sure.
I like this framing a lot. I think it makes a lot of sense. And I think that it really demonstrates his growth and evolution from this, you know, outcast to a real leader. That was something I was noticing a lot here, was his capabilities, you know, of being a leader, and also like the way the narrative wants us to think of him as a leader. I drew that connection in a different way, but to finish what you were saying, I like this a lot. I think it works really well. And I think Sam is a big turning point in Jon's 4th chapter. Is like, that's Jon's one of his biggest opportunities to really demonstrate his leadership skills, and also his enjoyment of it, and like he feels a real sense of duty towards it. And we see that here too. He says that he felt like he knew what he must do, or something. I think the narration says something like that. So I think Jon just isn't just like, oh, I like being a good friend. It's, oh, I feel like this is my duty. This is my calling. I think that makes a lot of sense.
Yeah, and it's fairly unique compared to a lot of the other characters. Obviously, you can say someone like Ned has a similar calling and pull and sense of honor. But I think Jon's, he just feels more heroic. He feels more classically heroic.
Right. I liked you talking about him as an archetype.
Yes.
I liked that. I mean, he's still very human. He's not like, you know, inhuman, but yeah.
But part of that is that we think of those old heroes in this zoomed out, almost mythical way, where you don't see their day to day. When you watch 24, you don't see Jack Bauer pee. Like, you know,
Sure.
You don't think of these like sweeping, grand, heroic figures in that way.
Yeah.
So all of those real-time characters, even Ned, I don't think about as being heroic, but the way Jon is rendered so far, it has a simplicity, a potency, and a restraint for not seeing him that much that keeps him feeling more classically heroic than some of our other characters.
Sure. And it's not romantic. You know, we see Jon sort of experience that, like, oh, there is no romance to being a brother of the Night's Watch. It's actually very miserable, and most of these guys are criminals and shady people and don't know how to wield a sword, and we see him experience sort of the grim reality of it. But at the same time, you're right. I think the way that this is structured in, like, you know, the few number of chapters and the way it feels zoomed out is, it does keep it feeling still very heroic and, we say archetypical.
Yeah.
So yeah, I like that.
And I know that that's not as simple as it will always be. Part of that is a feint, you know, George kind of setting things up in a T-ball way, where we will challenge and undermine.
And subvert, because he loves that.
That feeling of heroism in a non-cheap way. I mean, obviously the growing pains across Jon's arc are somehow only more endearing. But for now, I was struck by just the incredible promise and momentum in his storyline, where it felt like he was growing into this new occupation. I was calling him a general, but more literally in the chapter, there's a scene at that feast where they're talking about the jobs that all of them are going to get once they're sworn in as brothers of the Night's Watch. And they're all assuming that Jon will be one of the Rangers.
Right.
And then we see him almost test drive that possibility when he grabs a horse and grabs Ghost.
Goes off to ride by himself, yeah.
He goes off on like a mock ranging. And
that's true.
This was my favorite part of the chapter, and I think the part I got the most out of it felt like he was zooming out, not just into this role as a general, but almost literally when he was on that little midnight ride. It felt like he was zooming out, flipping back to the very front of our copy of the book and looking at the map.
Absolutely. Yes. It's a beautiful moment where he sort of like looks out at the King's Road and it describes all of the places that the road leads to. It's really lovely.
Winterfell, Riverrun, King's Landing, the Eyrie, Casterly Rock, Dorne, Bravos, and even Old Valyria. That moment was so beautiful. It felt cinematic. I mean, I always talk about it in those terms of zooming out and zooming in, but that's really what this moment did. It was such a grand, sweeping moment. It felt like, I mean, this is sort of the other end of the bookend. When there's that title card in the third Lord of the Rings movie and you get Return of the King, this felt like kind of we're laying the track for that. Like, here's a preview of a king.
I see.
Here's the introduction of possibly a future king.
Love it.
And I don't, this is where I wanted to throw the question to you. All of this setup and promise and potential and this like fated journey that Jon seems to be on, I feel like there are two possibilities of where this is going. One is that he is the next kind of House of Cards style character like Ned, who will then be systematically destroyed. Or is he someone to believe in? Is he kind of a handhold for us to invest all of those heroic hopes in? How are you reading him at this moment?
Well, it's unfair because I know how the story goes.
Well, ignore that.
Yeah, I'm just saying it's hard to. You know, you can say you're ignoring it, but it is hard to
You're
do that.
You're a goddamn professional.
That's true, I am. At this point in the book, if I'm a first-time reader, yeah, I see, like, even if I don't know that Ned is going to die, I can see Ned falling apart, and I can see how is he going to get out of this, compared to Jon, who is struggling and has been through lots of struggle, but is much more the underdog than Ned, and he's got all this heroic framing, so I believe in and want him to succeed more, I think, than Ned. Not that I've given up on Ned, not that Ned isn't relevant anymore. You're still incredibly invested in Ned and his cause, and obviously like who he represents for everybody else that you care about in this story. But Jon, I think, is somebody you maybe have a bit more hope in than Ned, especially because the age as well, like that's huge. I mean, Ned's not old, he's in his 30s, so are we. But in terms of this world, he's a father with children who are almost grown, and versus Jon, who is like becoming an adult, is coming of age and is taking on that classic fantasy role. So yeah, I think he is somebody to believe in at this point.
I don't have a clear answer to this question. It may have sounded like I was leading the witness there, but I really wasn't, because I could argue both of these positions, and simultaneously I do feel both of these ways. Because I have incredible memories and experiences and emotions wrapped up in the show. But I'm way more invested and I feel much more involved in the books because you get so much more detail. Those experiences, there's something pure. I did the audiobooks the first time I went through the series.
Yeah.
And there's something incredibly pure for the way my brain works of just having the story bolted into my brain through an audiobook. That is somehow even more involved than the visuals that you get from the show. So my experience with the books ends at the end of Dance with Dragons.
When Jon is killed.
And that's the very last chapter of that book, is Jon getting knifed. So he is sort of that next.
I was going to say, you see him systematically taken down, especially like within his own system. It's not like he's killed by the wildlings; he's killed by his own men.
He's killed by brothers of the Night's Watch.
So like it totally tracks. Yeah.
But on the other hand, he is someone to believe in, and you know, eventually he'll be resurrected. Like,
sure. Is that canon in George's mind? Do you know?
I don't think we have confirmation there, but if they a departure that big, I imagine.
Yeah, immediately that would be wild. They'd be like, yeah, fuck you, George. We're gonna resurrect this character because Kit Harington's hair is insured for $1 million or whatever.
But assuming that Jon does come back from the dead, it would be pretty funny if he didn't. But assuming Jon does come back and plays that role through the rest of the series here, I still pin my hopes on him. I still feel like I'm investing in him as a penny stock, and I'm watching it the rest of the show.
Because I feel like even if he does, he does die and doesn't come back, and like the whole dream of what Jon represents dies with him, I don't think that's true. Because I think even if he is dead, what he represents is still there. The hope that he has sparked is still there.
Yeah.
And you still get people like Sam who are still alive after Jon dies. And so Sam is who he is because of Jon. So I think even if Jon is killed, he is not systematically destroyed in the same way that Ned is.
I find Jon to be a source of hope, where I find Ned to be kind of a grindstone for realization and clarification about this world.
Right, because, like Ned's kind of a wake-up call in a way that Jon is
exactly.
sort of like a salve to the nightmare.
Because the Ned storyline leaves you with this sense of realism. It breaks that narrativity. Versus the almost romantic fantasy sort of hope and honor and idealism that I'm talking about, that I still invest all of those feelings in Jon, because for me, and I want to know what you think of this, for me, Jon feels like a counterweight to the grim, dark fatalism that can sometimes devour the rest of this world.
Yeah.
To the point that even I know I'm doing this like real-time spin, but I know he's about to take his vows and become a brother of the Night's Watch. But in my head, it kind of feels like he's being knighted. Because I know a lot of the other guys at the Wall are bags of shit.
Right.
But Jon isn't. And I know he's going to take all of those vows seriously. But before he meets Ygritte. But
oops.
You know what I mean? Like, I trust that he will try to live up to these things.
Like, he believes in them. Yeah. Like, he doesn't just, like, say them because he has to, because this is, like, it was this or die. Like, he chose to be here and is treating it with respect and
Do you look at him the same way, though, as this kind of counterweight?
Yeah. But you're right, because I think this world can very easily get kind of weighed down by that grimdark mentality. And I've always been a fan of the grimdark thing. I've always been a fan of, like, realism and groundedness, and like things aren't always great and dandy and romantic. Like I'm a negative person. I'm a fan of that in my stories because it feels real to me. But also, I think if you have too much of that, it's too much. And Jon really feels sort of like the counter to that. I mean, Arya does kind of too in a way. I mean, Arya deals with so much shit through her whole story, poor girl, but she is also so persistent and is so driven by her cause.
And they're very parallel characters. And they both get knifed.
Right. That's true. So like that's a good point. So she, I think, is like the other half of that, I think, which is wonderful because they are so tied like from the beginning of this story. So I like that a lot. So yeah, I totally buy what you're saying, especially because I also saw some of this, like, not romantic, but this like classic fantasy heroism in Jon.
A ray of hope.
Yeah, through a couple of Tolkien connections, which I was excited about. So I believe in our last Jon chapter, if not the one before, we talked about the like very like pretty overt parallels between Jon, Sam, Pip, and Gren as like our four hobbits in the Lord of the Rings. Like that's a pretty, I mean, Sam, obviously, and then Jon is our Jon is our Frodo, Pip is Pippin, and then Gren is the other one, Merry. And so we talked about those comparisons, and there are always some little Tolkien things here and there that George is playing with. But it popped up again for me here in a couple ways, notably in that like anytime we're going to think about Jon and Sam, we're going to think about Frodo and Sam. So that's like already there, just like from the get-go, just sort of by default. But also what was sort of resting there for me was when he's looking out at the road that you described, that beautiful moment, the way that it's the text says that the road stretched out before him, and it was like showing all the places Jon would never see. The world was down that road and he was here. And that reminded me very strongly of that line in one of Tolkien's songs, which was turned into a song in the movie, which says, "The road is behind, the world ahead." Or sorry, home is behind, the world ahead, excuse me. And so that idea of that song being, you should leave home, you should go out and explore the world and experience life and, take risks and experience things and not just be at home forever.
But it's more comfortable.
Right, sure. I'm not just saying that to you, okay? I'm telling you to leave the house. But Jon is not able to go experience all of that. He has to stay here, and he feels so trapped. And also he's described as having this restless feeling. It says a deep restlessness was on him. And even when he goes off for that ride and takes Ghost with him, it says a wolf needed to hunt. Because Jon kind of lets Ghost run off ahead of him. And Jon and Ghost are basically, like, Ghost is just a representation of Jon and his personality and his soul, basically. And, Jon needs to go out and do something. And Jon feels so trapped. And I think what this is sort of telling us is that that comparison invites us to think about who Jon is. And I think what Jon wants is to be a Frodo character. Obviously, Jon doesn't know who Frodo is. That doesn't exist in this world. But he wants to be that kind of person. He wants to be this classic hero who accomplishes things and is like this honorable knight, you know, even if he's not an actual knight, he's like a knight. He honors his vows. He takes things seriously. He does what he's supposed to do. He can fight with a sword. He wants to be this great ranger. We see him not accepting the fact that Benjen is probably dead because he like wants to hold out hope and believes in like, I guess, good prevailing over evil. So he wants to be that person, but he just doesn't get to be. And that's again where I think the grimdark reality of this world that you were talking about, you know, correlates with and coincides with and melds with who Jon is and who he wants to be. And so I think what is happening here is, as Jon is rising into this general status that you talked about, he's sort of looking for and finding a different purpose. His purpose is not to go out into the world and save the world and, you know, take the ring to Mordor, etc., etc. His purpose is to stay here and to be a good leader. When he has that moment when he's out on his ride and he realizes he has to go back and goes to talk to Maester Aemon on Sam's behalf, he's realizing he has to sort of be a leader for Sam. He's not just being a good friend, he's being a leader. He's appealing to other people in charge, knows who to talk to and how to talk to them, says things that are really smart, and is like thinking about things beyond just Sam. Because even if Jon's primary motivation is his personal affection for Sam and like not wanting Sam to die or be hurt, he expands it out beyond just Sam and thinks about the organization and like, you know, the good of the company, right? Because he says like, Sam's not going to be useful to us if he stays here. He'll be much more useful if we put him in this other place. It'll be more beneficial for everybody involved. So he's thinking in this like in these big picture terms that a leader needs to think in. And so I think that's what's happening is Jon is recognizing he can't be a Frodo and is learning how to be something else. I don't know what that something else is. I suppose it's Aragorn.
Neither does he, though.
Right. Yeah. I suppose the Aragorn thing could be it because you said Return of the King and Jon eventually is like, you know, this close to becoming the king. And I think it makes the most sense.
Jon has this kind of nested identity in the same way Strider is then revealed to be this son of Gondor.
True. He's got this like this royal lineage. Yeah.
Yeah.
The other nice thing that I think also invites the Tolkien comparison is when those guys are chosen, there are 8 of them. When you add Sam, it makes 9. And there are 9 members of the Fellowship.
Oh, that's nice.
I thought that was nice and clean. Again, there's not like a 1-to-1 where Boromir is, you know, whoever. But it just felt nice and clean. And I felt like, why 8 people? That becomes 9. Like, why choose that number? You know, I just thought it was not insignificant. And I like the way that these ideas I came across are interacting with the ideas you had about Jon's leadership. I think it makes a lot of sense. So I think the fact that we get so few Jon chapters and they do feel so zoomed out and heroic and fantastical, I think works as a way for us to be like, well, he wants to be this kind of hero. Mm-hmm. He can't quite be that. So what can he do within this world instead? And I thought it was fun to think about.
And I always enjoy the comparison to Ned within Jon's storyline because we see Ned come across realizations too late, when it's way too late to do anything about it.
Way too late,
like he's already in prison and then he's putting things together.
Good job, Ned. Good job. Yeah.
And Jon recalibrates with an agility that Ned never has. And
he learns fast.
Yeah, and I really like the comparison you made. I hadn't really thought about it, of how tightly Jon and Ghost can kind of echo each other, because I wrote down that same line. Of course, we keep doing this.
This happens all the time.
A wolf needed to hunt. But I want to jump on your point before I even do mine, because I was struck later, and I didn't know what to do with it at the time. When Ghost comes back, when Jon's on his way to Maester Aemon, he's got blood on his face.
Yeah,
like the wolf has hunted and is now coming back.
Yes, his purpose has been fulfilled. Know, he did what he set out to do.
But talking about the blood it's a very explicit reminder of what is involved in a hunt.
Sure.
That there is something bloody and difficult and tense.
It's not just beautiful and romantic, it's also gross and violent, yeah.
But I think Jon's initial understanding of the world with, playing at swords with his brothers in Winterfell, I imagine his understanding of conflict is fairly simple and physical and violent. But if the wolf comes back from his hunt covered in blood, I think what Jon does here as part of that recalibration of I need to lead instead of just wandering the countryside as some fantastical knight.
Right.
What he does is go to bat for Sam. And there is a level of conflict, whether it's him jamming his boot in the door or just bullying Gren into getting Maester Aemon out of bed to talk to him.
Yeah, it's not Gren, it's another guy, but I forget his name. Chet.
Sorry, same stupid ass fake half a name.
Yeah, it's not one of his friends. It's like he's a steward. But
they look the same in my notes.
Sure.
In my mangled penmanship.
I understand.
But there's a fight there. He's pleading Sam's case, but he's also arguing his value. There is, I mean, it's kind of the pen is mightier sort of argument, but he is doing a sort of battle.
Himself. Yeah.
He's going to bat for Sam.
Yeah.
And I think at the end of that chapter, his face is sort of metaphorically covered in blood too, and he's also gone on a hunt and come home victorious. So I like that they wrap up in the same spot. Again, that wasn't even my reading of the line. I just loved it because that paragraph ends, that kind of him zooming out and seeing the map. It ends with those lines that you quoted before. Jon let him go. A wolf needed to hunt. And I think Jon is romanticizing that simplicity, in the same way we've talked about the simplicity of his heroism at this stage. But I think Jon views his own needs as fairly similar to that, where he needs combat. They always talk about how he's the best of all the guys on the wall. He's the best one with a sword. He's the best one with a horse. So he
needs a purpose.
He thinks he needs to hunt, though. That's why he goes off on this little, I don't know, test drive ranging.
That's why he wants to be a ranger. He doesn't want to be a builder or a steward,
But part of that is not generalizing his needs onto everyone else's. And that's why I was talking about him as general. I think that's why you're talking about him as a leader, because he recognizes that Sam, who he's already clocked as his greatest asset and friend here, Sam doesn't need to hunt. Sam needs help and protection. And then all the benefits that he will provide will come downstream of that. But he needs help and protection. And this is the part that made me emotional, because
I see.
this is why Jon is a hero. Because that help and protection that he literally argues for and makes the case for is not judgmental. It's not condescending or cruel or resentful in the same way we see everyone else talk about Sam.
Yeah, it's not, what are we going to do with Sam?
Alistair Thorne is this like Gilbert Gottfried insult comic every time he talks about Sam Tarly.
So mean, yeah.
And I think that heightens the contrast because in a lot of ways, Alistair Thorne is what Jon thinks he should grow up to be. But we're already seeing him diverge from that path in the same way he's already diverged from his father's path.
I see, yeah.
So I loved that him arguing that this guy needs help and protection because he's not good at any of the things Jon is good at. There's not a judgment there. And that's why I put all my eggs in the Jon basket. That's why I think he's this counterweight to the grim, dark fatalism of the rest of the story, because it is Jon's POV, for me, that keeps Game of Thrones from ever feeling oppressive.
I see.
Even when Jon loses.
Right, even when he experiences the horrors TM.
Yes, even when he dies.
Yeah,
because hope is, and that really is the word of what I feel about Jon and what he inspires in me. That's sort of the torch that I can keep burning through all the miserable chapters, which I enjoy for different reasons.
Of course, yeah.
But hope is not about succeeding. It's not about success. It's that thing I like in Faustus. It's striving. It's aspiration. It's yearning. And in the end, that's usually enough. That's enough to like keep you turning the page and not feel that this is just some like nihilistic screed. It never feels like that.
Yeah.
And I think Jon is kind of the secret ingredient in the story for keeping that flame alive.
I think that's wonderful. And I also think that to zoom it out, like I think Jon genuinely saved Sam's life here. I genuinely think that. Even if he didn't literally, like, Sam would just have crumbled away in his current position at the wall. And so if you zoom it out, I mean, remember later on, I think it's in Clash of Kings or maybe it's Storm, Sam kills the White Walker and like becomes this great maester eventually. Like, Sam is necessary to this world, and not that saving a person's life only matters if that person ends up curing cancer or whatever the fuck, but like the fact that like the narrative rewards Jon for this kind of heroism that you're talking about. And I think that just further enriches and maybe proves what you're saying. It's really wonderful.
Yeah, I found this pretty heartwarming, as I have all of Jon's chapters. So I got a lot out of this chapter.
I'm also realizing, just a quick fun little thing, I'm thinking a lot about the Targaryens right now because we've been doing our Fire and Blood series that we just wrapped up on Patreon. Go check it out.
Good plug.
We read the whole book, but
we read
a whole
the achievement.
book.
It's the 12 hours of analysis.
No, I meant that we have finished it. We finished the entire book. Anyway, of course, Maester Aemon is a Targaryen. He's this forgotten Targaryen.
Sure.
As I was reading the chapter, I was trying to see if there's anything fun I could pull from it. I didn't really find anything. It's just there. But what you said about Ghost with the blood coming back, and how Jon is metaphorically has blood, on him, thinking about it as he enters this room with Maester Aemon. He enters this room and they're sitting in front of a fire. And so you've got these two Targaryen men who either don't know they're Targaryens, or their Targaryen status is very different than any other Targaryens in this world. And they're sort of immersed in and surrounded by fire and blood. I just thought that was nice and symbolic and fun. So that's a fun thing to think about. Anytime Maester Aemon's on the page, you're going to be thinking about him being a Targaryen and Jon being a Targaryen as well.
Now I'm just doing my level best to not say Aemond instead of Aemon.
But
I can do you one better.
Oh, okay.
I can, off the dome, I can throw out another Tolkien connection here.
Oh, perfect.
Because, of course, Ghost having the blood on his face is like Denethor with the tomato juice.
I don't think that's canon in the book, but I appreciate the effort.
It's the only thing I see when I blink.
Well, and that's Denethor when that song is going, home is behind. He's like, that's disgusting.
Yeah.
Yeah. Wow. That's a great way to end your analysis. Thanks for that, Kim.
I love a tomato, though.
I do love a cherry
tomato.
I mean, I'm surprised that scene has not ruined cherry tomatoes for an entire generation.
There's almost nothing I love more. I'll eat an entire package in one go. We used to grow tomatoes when I was little.
Did you eat them like Denethor, though?
No, I wish you had. I'm too proper for that. But I would saunter through the garden, picking my cherry tomatoes.
While a little hobbit serenades you as your son dies and you don't care.
Well, sure.
Cool. Well, let us know what you thought of this chapter.
Yeah, please do. What did you get out of that Aemon and Jon kind of secret Targaryen? Because I don't... I mean, we both clocked it, but I didn't see that much meat on the bone there.
Yeah,
but please, what did you get from that in the chapter?
Yeah,
try to augment our criticism.
It's funny that reading it back, I'm like, how did they not know? No one else has a name like that except for Targaryens. Is there anyone named like Aemon, Tarly? Like, no. Come on, people. If it's got a weird A and an E, it's probably a Targaryen. Just saying. Whatever, it's fine. But please comment below, like and subscribe and all of that fun stuff. Also, little tease. Remember, we've got a secret project announcement coming up very soon. Again, I feel like I'm a 2013 YouTuber saying that, and like, oh, it's my YouTuber book, whatever. But there's a secret thing coming up. We're gonna announce very soon, so get hyped for that. Maybe guess in the comments what it is. But otherwise, thank you all for listening, and we'll catch you next week with a brand new episode.